Welcome to True Crime Bites, Death Row and Executions, where we honor lives lost and revisit the final chapters of those who crossed the line. On October 10th, 2025, just before sunrise, the state of Indiana plans to carry out the execution of Roy Lee Ward. For more than 2 decades, his case has haunted Spencer County, and the pain of his crime has weighed heavily on the family of 15-year-old Stacy Payne. Now, the legal process that began in 2001 is nearing its conclusion. That summer morning in July 2001, life in Dale, Indiana, was forever shattered. Stacy Payne, just 15 years old, was at home while her younger sister Melissa slept upstairs. Ward arrived at the house pretending to be looking for a lost dog. Stacy, kind-hearted and trusting, let him in. What unfolded was sheer horror. Melissa woke to her sister's screams, rushed to the stairs, and saw a stranger attacking Stacy. She grabbed the phone and dialed 911 in terror. By the time police arrived, Ward was standing in the doorway. They found Stacy gravely injured. The brutality of the assault was overwhelming. Stacy's injuries were catastrophic, and although she clung to life briefly, she died from the trauma Ward inflicted. Melissa, who had seen part of the attack and heard every moment of her sister's cries, was left with memories no one should carry. To understand the true weight of this crime, it's important to remember Stacy not just as a victim, but as the vibrant teenager she was. She was an honor roll student, a cheerleader, and had even won awards in public speaking. She worked part-time at Jenks Pizza, balancing school, activities, and her job like so many other teenagers. Just the night before her death, she and her family had attended a softball game. Melissa played while Stacy cheered her on. That evening was full of ordinary joy, the kind of moment families take for granted. Stacy had so much potential, her whole life ahead of her. Her murder wasn't just the loss of a young girl, it was the loss of all the dreams she never got to live. Ward was arrested immediately and charged with rape, murder, and criminal deviant conduct. In 2002, a jury found him guilty and sentenced him to death. That sentence might have seemed final, but what followed was more than 2 decades of court battles and appeals. In 2004, the Indiana Supreme Court overturned his conviction on a technical issue related to venue, ruling that pretrial publicity in Spencer County had compromised his chance at a fair trial. The case was retried, and Ward pleaded guilty in 2007. Even with his admission of guilt, the jury considered the aggravating circumstances, the cruelty, the violence, the terror inflicted, and recommended death again. The judge imposed it. Over the years that followed, Ward appealed his conviction and sentence at every possible level. The Indiana Supreme Court upheld the ruling in 2009. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear his case in 2010. He sought post-conviction relief, which was denied. He then filed federal habeas petitions, and even those were ultimately rejected. By 2017, the last of his federal appeals had run out. His guilt and sentence were firmly established. From that point on, the legal question shifted. Ward's lawyers stopped arguing over whether he committed the crime, that was settled long ago, and instead focused on how the state planned to execute him. They challenged Indiana's lethal injection protocol, questioning whether the drugs were expired or stored improperly, and whether the process risked causing unnecessary pain. These arguments were less about Ward himself and more about forcing the state to be transparent in its procedures. For Stacy Payne's family, though, the constant litigation was agonizing. Every new motion and every delayed date meant reliving the nightmare. Hearing Stacy's name in courtrooms instead of remembering her as the teenager she was. A cheerleader, a hardworking student, a sister with a bright smile. To them, the brutality of Ward's crime was undeniable. They wanted closure, not endless technical disputes. In August 2025, the Indiana Supreme Court closed the door on Ward's remaining appeals and set the execution for October 10th. The justices found that there were no valid grounds left to challenge his conviction or death sentence. The focus turned to clemency, the last step before execution. The Indiana Parole Board scheduled 2 hearings in September, one at the prison and one public session in Indianapolis. Family members of Stacy Payne would have the opportunity to speak about the impact of their loss. Supporters of clemency could make their case, but the ultimate decision rests with the governor. In Indiana, governors rarely grant clemency in death penalty cases, and recent history suggests that is unlikely. Roy Lee Ward has now spent more than 20 years on death row. For the Payne family, that is 20 years of waiting, 20 years without Stacy, and 20 years of seeing justice delayed. To them, October 10th represents not vengeance, but long-awaited accountability. The case also highlights broader questions about capital punishment. Supporters argue that execution is the only fitting consequence for such a cruel and senseless crime. Opponents argue that 2 decades of appeals and uncertainty show how flawed and costly the system can be. Whatever side one stands on, it is undeniable that Ward's case has become a benchmark for Indiana's death penalty process. On execution day, Ward will be transported to the death chamber at Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. If clemency is denied and no last-minute stay is granted, the sentence will be carried out just before sunrise. Witnesses will include family members of the victim, state officials, and members of the media. For the Payne family, it will be the moment when the system finally delivers on what was promised more than 20 years ago. This story is not just about the man who will be executed, but about the young life that was stolen. Stacy Payne wasn't just a name in a court document. She was a daughter, a sister, a classmate, a teammate, and a friend. She was a bright, accomplished 15-year-old with every reason to look forward to her future. Her murder robbed her family of milestones, graduations, birthdays, and all the ordinary joys of watching a child grow into an adult. Whatever happens on October 10th, the legacy of this case is clear. Roy Lee Ward will be remembered for his crime, but more importantly, Stacy Payne should be remembered for her life, for her laughter at a softball game, for her pride as a cheerleader, for her dedication as an honor roll student and worker at a local pizza shop. Her story is what gives this case its weight, and it is her absence that makes justice so urgent. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more true crime coverage. And I'd like to hear your thoughts. Does the death penalty bring justice, or does it prolong the pain for everyone involved? Comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.